The cameras were live on the Family Feud stage when Carol Whitfield stepped back from Patricia James's outstretched hand, looked away, and let it hang there. 300 people watching, 30 camera feeds running, and a handshake not happening. Patricia James was 44 years old, a high school librarian from Birmingham, Alabama, and she held her hand out for 7 seconds before she lowered it. Steve Harvey watched all 7 of those seconds. Then he set down his microphone, walked to the center of the stage, and said 14 words. "We are going to stop this game and talk about what just happened." In 39 years of Family Feud, no host had ever stopped a taping to address a moment like the one that had just occurred in front of everyone. What happened over the next 45 minutes would become the most studied sequence of footage in the history of daytime television. It was a Monday in June. The Family Feud studio in Atlanta was running warm. The air conditioning was managing the outdoor heat, but only barely, and the production team had placed extra water bottles at the contestant podiums. The James family arrived with the easy energy of a family that had spent weeks preparing their game strategy and were genuinely excited to be there. Patricia, 44, the librarian, was the obvious anchor, organized, warm, exactly the kind of contestant who makes a host's job easy. Her sister Renee, 41, her cousin Marcus, 37, her daughter Alicia, 22, and her husband Bernard, 51, who kept adjusting his tie and making everyone around him laugh. The opposing family, the Whitfields, were also warm, organized, TV ready. Carol Whitfield, 55, had done her hair and makeup with evident care. Her husband Gary, 58. Their adult children. They were, by every visible measure, a normal family on a game show that had been running for 4 decades. The trouble was not visible until the coin toss, when the 2 families met at the center podium before the first question. Steve Harvey facilitated the introductions the way he always does. Brief, warm, personalizing each handshake with a quick comment or a joke. Carol Whitfield shook Gary James's hand. She shook Marcus's hand. She reached Patricia James, and Patricia extended her hand, and Carol looked at Patricia's hand. And then Carol looked slightly to the left of Patricia's face and stepped back and said nothing. Patricia kept her hand extended for 7 seconds. Steve Harvey, standing 4 feet away, counted them. Later, in an interview, he said he counted them because he needed to be certain of what he was seeing. At second 7, Patricia lowered her hand, kept her expression neutral, and looked at Steve. Steve looked at Carol. Carol looked at the floor. The studio had not quite gone silent yet. It took the audience a few more seconds to understand what had just happened. But the crew understood immediately. A camera operator in Wing 3 later said that from his angle, he could see every face on the James side of the stage. And what he saw was not anger. What he saw was exhaustion, the particular exhaustion of people who have experienced this before and know exactly what it is. Steve picked up the microphone he had set down. "We are going to stop this game and talk about what just happened." The studio fell completely silent. Steve did not raise his voice. He did not move toward Carol. He stood in the exact center of the stage, between both families, and he looked at Carol Whitfield and said, "I saw it. Everyone in this room saw it. And before we do another thing today, I need to understand something, because that woman right there, extended her hand, and you didn't take it, and I need to understand why." Carol looked at her husband. Gary Whitfield had gone still. Carol said, very quietly, "I didn't mean anything by it." Steve said, "Carol, I'm not here to embarrass you. I'm not here to put you on blast. I'm here because I cannot, in good conscience, continue this show as if what just happened is something we move past by going to the next question. It is not something we move past. The room held its breath. Steve turned to Patricia. "Patricia," he said, "I want to ask you something, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. How many times in your life has something like that happened to you?" Patricia James was quiet for a moment. She was still standing with the particular stillness she had maintained since she lowered her hand. She said, "Enough times that I stopped counting." The studio fell completely silent again, a different kind of silence. Not the silence of shock, the silence of recognition. Half the audience, looking around, was nodding. Steve Harvey pressed his lips together. He looked at the ceiling, he looked at the floor. When he looked up, his face had changed. He said, "Let me tell you something. I grew up in a time and a place where that kind of thing happened and nobody said a word. Where you swallowed it and moved on and pretended it wasn't what it was, because saying what it was made things harder. I watched my father navigate things I am too emotional right now to describe in detail, and every time he swallowed it down, something in him went quiet. And I watched that quieting happen for years." He stopped. "I am not going to be quiet about this. Not on this stage, not on this show. Not in front of 300 people and every camera in this room." He turned back to Carol. He said, "Carol, I am not going to end your time on this show. I am not going to call you names. I am not going to humiliate you. Because humiliation is not the same thing as change. And the only thing that actually matters here, the only thing, is what you understand when you leave this room." Carol's eyes were wet. Steve said, "Patricia James is a librarian. She spends her life putting books in children's hands so they can grow into people with bigger minds than the world they were born into. She drove here, she prepared, she dressed up, she brought her family, and she extended her hand to you. That's a human being extending her hand to another human being. That's it. That's the whole story. And what that woman felt when you stepped back, I need you to sit with that. I need you to feel that. Because that feeling is something she has felt her entire life, and she did not choose it. And you just added to it." Carol said, in a voice that had lost all its previous composure, "I'm sorry." She looked at Patricia. "I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm sorry." Patricia looked at her for a long moment. Then Patricia said, "Come here." Carol Whitfield crossed the stage. Patricia James opened her arms, and the two women stood in the center of the Family Feud stage in front of every camera and held each other. The crew members were openly crying. Steve Harvey sat down on the edge of the stage, his expensive suit, the cameras, the format, none of it mattering. And he sat there and let what was happening in front of him happen without narrating it. After a moment, he stood. He said, to the cameras, to the audience, to everyone, "This has never happened in the 39-year history of this show. And I want to say one more thing to everyone watching at home, because what just happened in this room matters beyond this room." He looked directly into the camera. Prejudice is not always a cross burning. It's not always something you can point at and name. Sometimes it's a hand not taken. Sometimes it's a step back. Sometimes it's 7 seconds of someone waiting for a basic human acknowledgement and not getting it. And the people who experience that, they know what it is. They have always known what it is. The question is whether the people doing it are willing to know too. He announced, before the families left the stage, that both families would receive the full game prize. He also made a personal call, on stage, on speaker, to a national empathy and education initiative that he had supported for 4 years, and arranged for a library donation in Patricia James's name to the Birmingham public school system where Patricia worked. 5,000 new books. designated for titles that center the experiences of people whose stories have not always been on the shelves. But Steve wasn't done. He asked Carol Whitfield if she would be willing to meet with Patricia privately after the cameras stopped, if Patricia was open to it. Patricia said she was open to it. Carol said yes. They spent 40 minutes together in a production room while the studio reset. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, it became the most watched Family Feud episode in the show's history on digital platforms. 180 million views in the first week. The hashtag 7 seconds was used over 42 million times. Counselors and educators used the clip as an opening for conversations about implicit bias in over 6,000 schools across the United States. 3 months after the taping, Carol Whitfield sent a letter to Steve Harvey's production office. He shared it publicly with her permission. In it, she said that the 40 minutes she spent with Patricia James after the cameras stopped were the most important 40 minutes of her adult life. A year after the taping, Patricia James was named Alabama School Librarian of the Year. At the award ceremony, when asked what the most important thing she had ever done for her students was, she said, "I kept my hand extended." 5 years later, Carol Whitfield volunteers at a community organization that facilitates cross-cultural dialogue in her city. She has referred to the taping as the day she was given a mirror she hadn't known she needed. She sends Patricia James a card every June. The library in Birmingham received its 5,000 books. There is a small plaque near the entrance that reads, "In recognition of a hand extended." Patricia James walks past it every day on her way to work. There are moments that happen in public that should have happened in private. Moments of reckoning that only become possible because witnesses were present. What happened between Carol Whitfield and Patricia James on that stage in June was one of those moments. Steve Harvey did not orchestrate it. He simply refused to walk past it. He stopped. He named it. He held space for it. And in doing so, he gave 2 women the chance to do something that neither of them could have predicted when they drove to a game show on a warm Monday morning. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that courage isn't only about grand gestures, but about the small refusal to look away, subscribe to this channel and hit that thumbs up button. Share this with someone who needs to see that change is possible, and that it starts with being willing to be seen doing the wrong thing and choosing differently. Have you ever witnessed a moment that changed how you saw something you thought you understood? Let us know in the comments. And ring that notification bell for more moments that prove that grace is always the most powerful choice.